I felt like my life was completely over. I'd ruined everything, was worthless. There was like no way to recover. And yeah, I just didn't want to exist anymore. It was so painful. Anyway, sorry, this is so fucking this is so hard. I have so much respect for everyone who comes on this podcast.
So you had 3 brothers growing up, and were you all born in Melbourne, or?
Mm-hmm.
And
then we moved to London
right.
at some point when I was like 12 for a few years. Yeah.
Okay. And so what was that like growing up with 3 brothers?
Yeah, well, so 2 older brothers and then me, and then 6 years younger than me, my younger brother. Yeah, I used to tell, there were so many stories of me when it was just me and the 2 older boys, and like they would do kind of horrible things to me, but it's kind of like funny to think about. Like they would like, actually one time they destroyed my tea set, which was really mean.
Oh no.
But they would like cut my Barbie's heads off, and like they would like throw food on the floor and make me like be a dog and eat it.
Oh my God.
And the worst thing was in the car, I would have to sit in the middle. And they would do this thing where they would grab my legs from either side and like pull them apart, which was so painful and mean. And then I'd get in trouble for screaming. One time they got a chain. There was this chain, like a plastic chain, but they like tied it around my neck and hung me from the bunk. And my nana came and rescued me. But it was kind of like all fun and games. And I think now that's how I know, like if someone's teasing me, then I know it's like a sign of affection kind of thing. Like I'm very used to. I think that's probably maybe why I then just gravitate to, like working in finance or whatever, places where there are a lot of men around, because I just understand that language more of like being mean to people who I'm like joking around in a seemingly like quite aggressive way. Yeah.
And you remember when your youngest brother was born, or was it hard, or?
No, I don't think so. I
have 4 younger siblings, and I remember it being hard at times, just feeling like you were losing attention or something like that. I don't know whether you had that feeling or.
No. So my thing losing attention was with my brother getting diabetes.
Oh, yes. Mm.
Which that's all the stuff that comes up in, therapy and everything.
Mm. And how old was he and how old were you at that point? And which brother was this in the order?
The one just older than me. So he was 6 and I was 4.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah,
he ended up getting a lot more attention because type 1 diabetes it requires a lot of attention, right?
Yeah. So
I'm diabetic, so yeah, I know.
Type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
So yeah. I guess what happened is so you have a child who gets a life-threatening illness, so obviously it's like very scary for the parents. And I think my mom is particularly an anxious person, and I mean that's already like, well, yeah, obviously I don't know. And we did talk, you've been on this podcast as well, so we talked about that a bit with you. But basically from that point, because a 4-year-old doesn't understand, like, something like that. So I just internalized there's something wrong with me. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about. It's like, yeah, this is where the wound is, because it's like, fuck, I just feel like I'm going to start crying even saying these things. But it's like, yeah, it's like there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve love, or I'm bad, which I've kind of been able to work through a lot of that. I was like, I'm a bad person. Like, because your brain has to make sense of it, right? A 4-year-old. And no one, you know, everyone's parents fuck them up. Like, we all will go on and fuck up our own children. Like, no one's, and even if there's no such thing as doing everything perfectly. Like, you can't, like, there's so many factors going on and things going on. But this is just what the story was for me. It was, and it's weird. I found this out through reading Normal People. It was so random in the pandemic.
The Sally Rooney novel?
Yeah. So it was maybe like 9 months or something after I'd become depressed and got the like, whatever, clinical diagnosis and whatever.
That was during the lockdown, or?
No, that was like the year before. Right. And then I'd gone on this, yeah. I was actually in like quite a good place, so able to access kind of deeper stuff. And yeah, reading that novel, it was just like I was having this visceral reaction. Like, it was so weird. Like, a lot of people found that novel like deeply moving and whatever. But it was like I couldn't stop crying reading. It was weird, the impact it was having on me. And then it got to this point where it's just this horrible, like, I don't know if anyone who's familiar with it. Have you read it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so the bit when she's saying how mean her brother is to her and how he was like, you should go and kill yourself or something. And then he's like, oh my God, and what did your mum do? And she was like, my mum was just there watching. And it's like this idea that it's just like her, and for her, that was the like, her family, like, awful to her, and like she really didn't feel loved by them, which is like also there's evidence to like whatever. My case is not like that. Like, my family, even saying those stories about my brothers, like, my family does love me, but in my brain I was like, that I feel the exact same. So I had this like, I was just like distraught, like could not stop crying, and it was like, that was the wound. It was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm not loved, like I don't belong, like I'm not wanted, like all these kind of things. And yeah, I am super fortunate that I do have good relationships with my family, like, and I do have parents and so I called my mum in that moment, because I am just fully aware that some people literally, their parents do like abuse them or something, and that is not my situation anyway. So as you can tell by me being able to call my mom, and it was just like hard, because I was like trying to express, and she was like, you know how much we love you and whatever, but I was like, but did you love me then? Which is like so sad for my inner child, like for anyone who does this therapy, which sadly so many of us have to do and come across these concepts, but it is just like this little girl who is like, feels like she wasn't loved, or there's something wrong with her.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
That must have been really hard.
Yeah, and she was like, yeah, of course. she was like, oh my God, of course. Like, of course. And like sent me all these photos of me as a child and everything. But she said, she was like, yeah, I think something happened. Because there were always stories about like, oh, Delia, you were always having tantrums. You were always like running away. You were always whatever. And I was like, why? And that, I think, fed into me being like, I'm a bad person. Like, there's something. I'm like the evil child. But then to realize like children aren't evil. Like a 4-year-old's not evil. And so, yeah. So I was like, why was I doing that and what was going on? And she was like, well, I guess maybe there was a change like after your brother got diabetes, because the boys were like always so happy like playing together and you were like the center of attention and the girl and like everything. And then overnight like things changed and then your behavior changed. And
so that changed. Obviously it required a lot more attention on him, but did it also prevent him from playing with your other brother, or it disrupted things in other ways? Or
well, I think he was, yeah, it would have, I'm sure it would have, I mean, I guess as a child, you're kind of just have a very narrow lens of the world. So I think, yeah, obviously it was really hard. I mean, I don't need to say to you, you know what it's like. It's like you have to have injections multiple times a day, finger pricks, everything changes, like the food you eat changes, like suddenly you're this different person at the party, at the kids' party or whatever, and you can't have these things. And then, yeah, probably if one person's really sad because they're sick, then the other people, yeah. I mean, my oldest brother has passed away now, so I guess I will never be able to ask him what that was like for him. To have his like little best friend brother suddenly unwell. Yeah. But I think, yeah, for me it was just like, I'm now always in trouble. And it was really like, I felt like it was unfair. Like, thankfully I've done the therapy to like know that it's normal for a child, but I would steal my brother's lollies because I was like, this is just unfair. Why does he get this special food? Because overnight, I don't know if this happened for you, but they changed like all the food in the house. So instead of like, so it's like none of us can have this food that has more sugar or whatever in it. But I didn't understand. It's like, okay, all the other kids at school get to eat this. Why don't I? But then on top of that, he also has this special food. And it sounds so anyone listening must be like, what? You know, I'm not the one suffering the thing. But the point is, it's just like a 4-year-old it's a fucking child. Like, they don't understand these things. You
lost a lot of attention and care very suddenly. Like, it totally shifted the dynamics of the house and it's made everything seem unpredictable and...
Yeah. And like, yeah, because I would then want attention and then I'm like causing trouble because it's like there's stressful stuff going on and I'm making it worse.
So you feel like you were acting out like probably to get attention, or is that what your mom was saying? Or
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think this is kind of... I mean, I think people are so aware of it, right? When you have another child. Yeah, you're the oldest child, and then when new children, it's like, oh, the oldest child's going to get jealous. Or even like with the dog, it's like, okay, the dog, now there's a baby, like make sure you look after the dog. Like the dog. But I think with an illness that's overlooked, and I felt there's this book, the Journey from Abandonment to Healing, I think. And there's been, a few resources where they've specifically mentioned like this feeling of abandonment it doesn't have to be you know, it's so painful to say these things because no one wants to think like, oh, my parents were like really doing their best and it's no one's fault and everything. And it's not like, yeah, you're deliberately hurt or abused or neglected or like left on a doorstep somewhere. But yeah, these things are saying, like, examples are like, you know, a parent had to have an extended time in hospital or something, or a sibling gets an illness. Like, it's literally, you know, so many situations that are totally unintentional, and that one is pointed out. And yeah, anyway, it's it's actually so great having this conversation with you, because you have this illness, but then yeah, so it's just, yeah, it's super complicated.
Yeah, for us, I was the oldest and I was diagnosed at under 2 years old, and so I don't think it had that same, I'm sure it had huge impacts on my siblings. It certainly had an impact on my childhood, but I don't think there was the same disruption, because it was right as my next brother was being born that I was diagnosed. And so I don't think we kind of all remember my own weirdness as a type 1 diabetic as like the kind of normal thing, you know what I mean? So there wasn't such a shift maybe.
Yeah.
So that was a big change. And like, how did it play out over the following years? Like,
Well, I didn't even find, so I realized that 2 years ago or whatever. I read Normal People and found that out. And then it was, yeah, it's crazy that I was seeing a psychiatrist at that time because I was depressed, and which I still find to be such a saying, like, psychiatrist. It's like, oh my God, everyone's going to think I'm like totally fucking crazy. Anyway. Yep. That's what happens if you get severely unwell.
I mean, I've seen a psychiatrist. It doesn't strike me as at all.
But you know what I mean? It's like, now it's like therapy is like, you can talk about that. There's like less shame around that. But I feel like there's still some, you know, mental illness has become like almost like trendy, or like, but there are some parts of it where it's still like, oh, don't talk about that. That has shame around it anyway. And I feel like, but thanks.
So in other words, you're saying like you didn't have this narrative about the diabetes until fairly recently.
Until recently,
right.
Yeah. And the psychiatrist, when I told this story, like, I couldn't believe it. She's like this super mainstream, like, you know, Harley Street, whatever, doctor. And she was like, oh yeah, have you heard of this thing, reparenting? Oh, she's like, yeah, there's this thing called reparenting. I was like, what? I could not believe she was talking, because I'd come to her to talk about alternative things like psychedelics or like kinesiology or, you know, some like, and she's like, like questionable to all that stuff. But on this, she's like, reparenting, like, she's like, yeah, there's this like inner child and you have to, I was like, could not believe this mainstream doctor was saying this, and then referred me to then psychology to specifically deal with this. And then, yeah, so now so many things make sense. And now I'm doing internal family systems, which I absolutely love and could talk about for hours. But from that point now, I can look back on my life having done, and now like, 3 years, I guess, of reading about it, like, so, like, whatever, seeing different therapists, like going to lectures, whatever. I can see all these patterns play out that affected me in all these different ways. Yeah, so basically, which is so common amongst so many people who feel like they're not good enough, they're not worthy, like they need to prove themselves. So it's like proving, it's like the academic stuff. Okay, how do I get approval or get attention or something if I'm like doing well? Yeah, and then later in relationships, in like romantic relationships, seeing that all play out. But I guess as a child, I don't know, you just kind of you just get on with it. And there was nothing apart from like, me generally feeling like, oh, I don't really belong in my family, which, yeah, is then probably also why I left and moved overseas, and I haven't lived in Melbourne really for the last, like, since I finished uni. I guess, yeah, it was just like a more subconscious thing. And then I had but yeah, I didn't have any like major issues until I became depressed.
Right.
Like 3 years ago. I would have just had like a happy great childhood. Yeah, did well at school, like had friends, like normal teenage stuff, like going out, having a good time, whatever.
And that was in London, or?
Yeah, so London. Oh, well, that's another. Yeah, so London. Yeah, so we moved to London, and then we went to boarding school because I guess we're used to like having so much space in Australia, and like the schools in London weren't really. Yeah, the best fit was to go to schools outside London, so we did that, and then yeah, I struggled with that.
With boarding school, or?
Yeah, with like homesickness. Like I think I like went on hunger strike to be like, take me back to Australia. But I think that's just normal. Like a 11-year-old or 12-year-old like taken out of my... Yeah, that was a big adjustment. Like I was in primary school in Australia, which is like basic, like, you know, you're doing spelling or whatever. To then I was, for some reason, ended up going into like the second year of secondary school in the English system. So it was like suddenly I was doing Latin, Spanish, French, chemistry, physics, like as separate subjects. Like I'd never heard those words before. It was like a big adjustment.
Wow.
But I mean, that's just stuff that I think that kind of just makes you more resilient and whatever. I got over it eventually and like had a great time.
But there's a transition period. It sounds like it was quite difficult.
Yeah, like I was crying every single day.
Right.
Like every day, non-stop in class. This girl would say to me, one of my friends back then would say to me, tomorrow's another day. It was like I just had to get through.
Just get through one day at a time.
Yeah.
Wow. And so how long were you in London for, or in the UK?
3 years.
Okay. So you're here from 12 to 15 or 11 to 14?
Yeah.
And then moved back to Australia again?
Yeah.
That, again, must have been quite difficult, right? Or was it okay?
I think it was okay.
Right.
It was starting, I think we like knew we were going to go back. I think it was more like a big, adjustment for my dad probably, which I don't think I appreciated at the time. Because, I think my mum wanted to be, I think it was probably pretty hard for her. And she wanted to be back in Australia. My oldest brother had already gone back. And then to like finish school. And then mum was like, yeah, we're going, like I kind of knew for a while, and then I would have been starting GCSEs here, but I wasn't going to do that, so then I was just like already checked out, like ready to go back. But my dad stayed like a year longer, and I think it was probably, hardest for him, which I didn't realise until recently, which is like, it's so funny with families, you think. And so many people have it, like, because you're in the family and you're like, my experience is like, you think you know everything about everything that's going on. But unless you take time to ask, like, what was that like for you? Like, like I remember someone talking about their sibling, saying like they'd had a hard childhood, and they're like, I mean, we had the same childhood, so no, you didn't. And it's like, but you don't know what someone else's experience is like. And as well with parents, like it takes you a long time to realize like parents are humans as well, who have their own experiences.
And so was the move hard for your brothers?
I don't know. Maybe I should ask them.
You weren't very close to them in your teenage years, or?
My oldest brother, there was, so he's the one who passed away, who I talk about in the first episode of this podcast, of like making something that could have helped him. And I said this in the eulogy, I talk about this, that like the teasing, everything growing up, like there was something we went on holidays to Rome and he sang this song, Benedict is a Pope and Delia is a Dope. And it was like this, he was just kind of teasing me throughout. But then, and then at some point it was like mean. He was like quite mean to me. Which I think is maybe a thing in our family, and maybe I used to be like that as well, like argumentative and like wanting to be right and like catching someone out and like calling them an idiot, like pointing out how flawed their argument is or whatever. And then like, yeah, but then at some point it turned around and we became really close. And he wrote me this letter like saying how sorry he was for like being a dick to me, which was so nice. Because I think a lot of siblings you just take for granted that you can just be awful to each other and then whatever. But he actually, like, as a teenager wrote me this letter. And then we became really close and he was like such a cool older brother. Like this would have been back after England. But yeah, he would like drive me, bring me Maccas to school, like drive me to whatever, like we would hang out, we would run together, and we were going to run. That was actually really horrible. On the day he died, we were training going to do a half marathon together, and I went for a run for that and asked him to come, and he didn't. But yeah, we did. So like we walked to, I mean, you're not going to know where this is, but my parents have a place in Point Road now on the Great Ocean Road. We walked from there to Lawn, which is like a 9-hour walk along the beach.
Wow.
Just like we did just like random crazy stuff together. Yeah, this really special, I think with boys, like he helped me with that stuff. Like if someone was being a guy was being a dick to me or something who I liked, like this like special relationship that you often, I think can be hard between like, there's different dynamics because you can be like, my other brother was more like protective of me or, wouldn't have wanted to know about me talking to boys or whatever, or help in that kind of way. But yeah, I guess with my other brother, it was we were super close growing up. Really, really close. And then kind of drifted apart as we were teenagers.
And so what was applying to unis like? Was it?
I guess I was just like, at school it was like, how can I get the best possible mark, like, and I was just very focused on that, like, I think I just realized it's a game, so It's like, how do you, the way it works in Australia, it's a percentile, and I was like it was called an enter score, I was like on the enter calculator, like calculating like how can I like maximize my score by whatever. So I just did subjects that would help me maximize it, which were like maths and science subjects, and then I didn't really know what to do, and my parents didn't really tell me anything, like didn't try and influence me in any way, and I just ended up,
there weren't expectations about where you would go or what you would study or anything like that.
No. So, which some expectations could have helped, because it was like, so I just kind of ended up continuing, like, okay, I guess I'm good at maths and good at chemistry and whatever, and I like that. So I'll just continue doing that. The one thing they did help with was I wanted to go and do a gap year and go to Senegal for some reason. I was like, wanted to go to a French speaking place in Africa.
Right.
And but they were like, why don't you go to college, which is like where you live. It's kind of copied from like the Oxford Cambridge system at Melbourne Uni. They have it. And they were like, introduced me to someone who did that. Because I guess, they were trying to deter me from doing that, which ended up working. So then I moved out and went to college, which isn't the most like a lot of people. I mean, Melbourne has 5 million people. There are like, the top universities there and like the third best in the country. Whatever. It's like you kind of just live at home and go. So that was something different than when I lived on campus. And
because not many people live on campus, or
not many people who are from Melbourne. Yeah, not many people in general. And it's not like the US or here where you move away. It's like most of my friends just stayed living at home. And you it's just like a cultural thing that you just like stay at home. You work, like the minimum wage is really high. People are more kind of into traveling and like doing these kinds of things.
So you wanted to go to Senegal, but they successfully dissuaded you. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess so.
And you stayed in Melbourne?
I stayed in Melbourne, went to college. That was amazing. It was my brother died the week before I went to uni, and I then was in this totally different world because suddenly 1 week later I was then at college, living full-time on campus with all these people who I'd never met before, like starting a whole new thing. So I guess it was like a whole different life, which meant that I didn't have to maybe go through the grieving, or maybe didn't properly grieve because it was like, it was a weird time.
Such a complete switch of everything else in your life that you didn't sort of have to live with it in the same context.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, we've already been going for 50 minutes. I'm like, okay. Then I moved to New York, then I moved here, then I started this podcast. And
how did you decide to move to New York?
I went on exchange. I went to Cornell, upstate New York. I loved it. I was in my 4th year. I absolutely loved it so much. And oh my God, that campus is so beautiful. Just like it's freezing cold there, which I love the freezing cold. And it's just like covered in snow for like 8 months or something. And I just wanted that experience to continue, I guess. And then everyone there is so ambitious. It's just totally different. So people are, I mean, you went to Princeton, you know what it's like. It's, I guess in Australia it's more, I mean, I was doing maths, like I don't know, it's more vocational in Australia. I think I was doing, I'd done an internship on like a chemical plant, and I don't know, New York just seemed like all these people are going to work on Wall Street and they're so ambitious, and it's like, cool, you're studying engineering, that means you're smart, you can get any job, and you can, like, I was just so excited by that. So
you're doing chemistry in Melbourne and maths at Cornell, is that right?
No, I was doing, my major was like chemical engineering.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I was doing maths and chemistry, and people were like, if you combine it, that's chemical engineering, right. Which turns out it's not really. But I ended up doing chemical engineering and maths as well. But yeah, so my idea was then I had to do a master's to finish that because that's what the model was. So I thought I'll just go to New York for a gap year. Like I had an American boyfriend and I was so excited. Like I just wanted to continue the experience. I was super naive. I had no idea that you can't just move countries. Like minimum wage in Australia is really high. As a waitress, whatever. So I just thought I'll be a waitress in New York and like just, and it was like, no, that's not how it works. And also, I came back like, I'm moving to New York, and people were like, you can't just do that. And that made me more determined. And quote, my dad, have fun sweeping the streets of New York. Like, how? Like, but I ended up figuring it out and being like, I mean, that was cool. People like, you have a degree, like you can get it, you're employable. I was like, what? Really? Like,
so you say you figured it out. You mean you decided to do a master's? No. So then I was like, okay, I'll move. And then I just ended up neglecting that plan. Because the being on a chemical, like that wasn't that appealing to me. I like solving problems and that's why I liked engineering. But then actually being on a chemical plant and like wearing men's clothes because I didn't make them for women and just like that wasn't really my thing. So then the idea that, you can solve problems and do analytical things but work in like a office in New York, that was really cool. I just didn't know that was a thing you could do. So just using the chemical engineering degree to go directly into work, because in the States you can kind of study whatever you want and then go do whatever job you want, right? And
exactly
what you're saying is that the educational system and the like career system in Australia is not really like that. Is that right? Or
no, it's more vocational. So if you work in like finance, you would have studied a commerce degree. And maybe hopefully that's changing. But that's there's a joke like if you do arts, it's like you can't get a job. But like that's not how it is. For you it's like, okay, you went to Princeton, like obviously you can get a job. It doesn't matter that you studied literature. Like it's like that's it
matters a little bit.
I was really naive and I went in, but I didn't understand that they wouldn't know what Melbourne Uni was it's so funny in where Australia is so funny in one of my interviews. They would just because then I started meeting people and I'm very fortunate to be introduced to my contacts were basically in finance, so very fortunate to get introductions to lots of investment banks. But I was so naive. I always tell this story that I was meeting this guy called David Lynch at Merrill Lynch, and I'd never heard of Merrill Lynch, and I was like to my dad, I'm meeting the founder of this place called Merrill Lynch. He was just like, you're such an idiot. I'd never, like Goldman, never heard of it, like none of it, like, so I was meeting all these people, but I was so naive, I didn't know, so I was like, oh cool, like, can I get a job here? And they're like, who are you? Like, what, because it's like all the internships, all this stuff that I just turned up, I'd graduated. They were like, how have you graduated? You don't have a job. What's wrong with you? I was like, what? Were you meant to think about this beforehand?
And were you just on a visa there or?
I was just like, as a tourist.
Okay, you were there as a tourist trying to get a job. And
but I just didn't, it was so funny. At one interview, she was like, wait, why? You've just graduated. I'm like, yep. She's like, why? I'm like, oh, well, in Australia, we graduate in, because it's like over winter that, like in December or January. I was like, well, we finished the year in November. It's like the calendar year. She was like, what? I'm like, because it's the Southern Hemisphere. Like the seasons are different. She was like, what? The seasons are different in the Southern Hemisphere? Like they were just like so confused. And and I was going to places where they were like, oh, we only hire from half of the Ivy Leagues. And like the Ivy League you went on exchange to isn't even in the half of the Ivy Leagues that we hire from. And like, let alone like a university in another country. So there were hurdles. But I was just like, I'm staying, like I want to be with my American boyfriend and like whatever. I'm going to figure it out.
But how did you do that? Did you get a green card or
I got a job. There's a visa thing with Australia where it came out of a free trade agreement or because there's an army base or something. So there's a visa class that Australians can apply for if you have a degree and you get a job.
Okay. So
I found out about that and
you got a job.
And I got a job.
Where was that?
At EY. Yeah. Banking. Yeah, it was really like you had to do that. I just didn't understand. Like I was asking, I'm like, what do I do in these job interviews? Like I just thought that I just asked for a job. I didn't understand that these are like super sought after jobs and that are highly competitive. And I also didn't realize it was like one of my good friends, her uncle is the CEO of Morgan Stanley, and he asked, like, so I had like good contacts, but they didn't work. Like he asked HR, whatever, to talk to me about a job, and they're like, no. It's like, there's so much red tape around that now in banking. So it was like, which people are probably listening and like, yeah, good riddance. You can't just get a job based on contacts.
But how did you manage that?
Well, eventually someone was like, they'd only ever hired MBAs, but they needed more people. So they were like, okay, we'll hire you. And then I was and then that was in consulting. And so so I was traveling around, living out of hotels, like, which I didn't like. I wanted to be in New York, like living in a hotel. I mean, people think that's super glamorous, flying on planes, living in hotels. It's like, I don't know why you'd want to do that in your whole life. It's like you're obsessed with hotel points. That's pretty miserable to me.
And you were traveling for work?
Yeah,
like
for work.
What kind of work was it? Or
transaction advisory. So like 2 companies have merged and then or a company, like I worked on GE Capital, they sold that whole General Electric used to have like a whole financial thing that they were then selling, and it's like helping them with that stuff. But yeah, I was just like, I didn't fucking know anything. I was just this like 22-year-old or something. But yeah, then I wanted to be in New York, and then I realized I want to move to investment banking because I was straight away like, wow, everyone here is obsessed with finance and like banks are the place to be, and I've got to be there to prove, because I think I got so involved in that US culture of like, that competitive thing, and like, which would go back to that like core wound of needing to prove myself or whatever. So I was like, I want to do investment banking. Right. So I'm like having previously like not even known what it was, which my dad, that's what he's done his whole life, but genuinely like I didn't know what he did until I was in New York, and then that seemed to be like the coolest thing in the world, and I was like, wow, okay, I need to do that. So then I moved into a role in EY there was valuations, like more financy, that would then, with the plan to move into investment banking, but I knew that would be in London.
Right.
Because I guess I knew at that point I wasn't going to stay there forever, and I wanted to move to London, and then moved to London, did investment banking, got depressed, life fell apart, and here we are now.
So you were 3 years in New York, or how long?
Yeah, like the exchange, went home, had a semester to finish, graduated, and then I think came back for about 3 years, yeah.
Right. And then how did you decide you wanted to move to London? Did you feel like it was moving back to London, or did you feel like it was...
Yeah, I think I knew I didn't want to go home, but I wanted to move somewhere more similar values to Australia, which was like London, and more... Yeah, because New York, I mean, it's just like a different planet for me, the US.
Was it too different, or?
Yeah, it was just the value. I was young, my boyfriend lived with first it was like 4 of his frat bros, then they got the apartment next door. It was like 10 of them like on this floor. And then I lived with like the sorority sisters of... And then it was like crazy. It was so much fun, but it was crazy. It was like what you see. I mean, you're literally from there, but for people who aren't from there, it's like you see this in movies. Like that is real life. Like just the like playing beer pong, like ordering kegs, like having these parties, just like crazy stuff. Like I remember going to this party, our neighbors, these people were just like, hey, shouted to us, like come across to our party. Like we went in there. There was just like lobster everywhere, like verve. And that guy, Martin Shkreli, was there, who went to prison for that hedge fund guy. Oh my God, like such weird stuff like that. It's just, you go clubbing on a Monday night, like Justin Bieber's there, whatever. At work, it was crazy. Like people doing coke at their desks, whatever. Like, so it was this kind of very unsustainable, like intense life that's not really normal. And then for me, it was mainly the values thing. Like I was still figuring out who I was, obviously, but there were just things that didn't seem right to me. And I just got annoyed. Like I got so sick of being spoken to like, oh, welcome, so you must be so grateful to have made it to the land of opportunity and stuff. And I was like, what the what? Like that?
As opposed to London where everyone's like, why are you here? Like,
yeah. Or I'm from a great place where we don't have like, people aren't being shot all the time. Stuff, or like there aren't holes in the road.
Totally. Like, I just meant that in New York, people are like, New York's amazing, whereas in London, everyone's like, London's crap. Like,
People are like, why did you leave a sunny place or whatever?
Yeah.
But, that got boring, like being made fun of how I spoke. Like after 3, it's like, this is just boring.
Yeah.
And,
agreed, yeah.
And the values thing of... Yeah, like I remember the first Christmas I was going home for a week and people were like, wow, you're going to take a week off? Like, I guess someone's not getting promoted. Like that.
Life stuff, which is just insane.
Yeah, they just weren't my values. So
you didn't want to return to Melbourne. And had you been back to London since you had left as a teenager or?
Like on holidays, probably, yeah. So
you had some connection to it still? Or did you not feel
more
like
just a connection of like a lot of Australians move here.
Right.
Like you have that visa to come and people, it's kind of like a rite of passage thing. Like people come. Like I think my brother was living here at that time. Like, yeah, people move here. People are always coming through here to go to Europe. Like it just feels more, way more connected.
Yeah. Whereas for Americans, it's like they don't think about it basically.
No. Oh my God. Yeah. Because I moved with the American boyfriend I had, and it was like, for an American to leave New York, it's like, wow, you're just destroying your career to move. Yeah.
And so how was that move? Did you...
Did you
go straight into... Well,
I quit and went traveling in South America for a bit and then around the US, which, oh my God, was like one of the coolest things I've ever done. We drove through like 15 national parks or something from Colorado, like through Wyoming, Montana, up to Canada, Washington, Oregon, through California, where you're from. Amazing. I ran the New York Marathon on my last day in New York.
That's amazing.
Went traveling, which classic. The reactions from people when I left of like, wow, like couldn't believe like quitting without a job, and then also traveling. People like, oh, I guess some people are so lucky, and I'm like, I earn the same pay we earn the same salary. Like I'm going to South America. It's like staying in hostels. Like you can also do that. But I mean, that's that's just
the
differences, right?
Yeah.
And because you your parents sacrifice so much so you can go to college and you don't have the same safety net. So it is, yeah. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, and then I came to London and people were like, oh, you should transfer. And I was like, no, I want to do banking. I'm going to get a job. And people were like, oh, it's so hard. You shouldn't just like move countries without a job.
People in New York or people in London?
Just lots
everywhere?
Of people.
So people were giving you lots of advice to kind of stay in the same industry.
People in New York were like, yeah, why would you move? It's so, oh my God, so funny. A manager who was like it was so interesting because I was there when Trump was elected and like in the campaign lead, and he was like this big Trump guy and carried all these weapons around with him in his car, and he I remember coming to London, I think, for a holiday, and he was like, whoa, it's so dangerous there, like watch out.
And you're like, you carry guns around?
Yeah, so no, I think it was people here. Yeah, I don't know. I guess this is a pattern that I just kind of say I'm going to do something and then I just don't necessarily think it through. No, I do. I just guess I back myself and take a risk, which is the thing I'm in at the moment, having just left a job and now I've got to back myself to get the next thing.
But backing up, you got into investment banking.
Yeah, so London. I got the job.
How did you manage that? Did you do a lot of interviews? Did you because you would have also needed the right to work. Oh, you already got the Australian.
Yeah, I think I already got a visa, but then they sponsored me, so that was fine. Yeah. Again, yeah, I think I went to... Yeah, I made a list of the banks and then I just...
Walked in.
Tried to get a job. No, I tried to get a job. No, and again, I used the contact thing, was like, how can I get an introduction to someone at this place and how can I get in and get the interview? But, yeah, and then I got this job.
Where was that?
Credit Suisse, RIP, no longer exists.
Was that in the Gherkin?
No, Canary Wharf.
Okay. And did you like it?
I loved it to begin with. I was like, I am so cool. Like, now I channel that time if I'm not feeling like confident. You know how your posture changes or whatever? And Jordan Peterson talks about this. But I remember I was like, stood up so straight. I was like, had so much pride in what I was doing. Like, I felt, this sense of whatever. But yeah, it wasn't healthy because I was like, I'm so cool that I work till 4 a.m. and like, I'm just devoting my whole life to this job and this is it and this is gonna be me for the next 10 years. Like, this is my life's purpose.
And what were you doing for them?
I was in the energy team in M&A investment banking. So, yeah. But yeah, it quickly fell apart.
How quickly?
I think the first 3 months or something, it was like I was in the office 6 or 7 days a week. Maybe it was 7 days a week. I remember there was some period where there was like a day, like I was in there every day. And yeah, it was quite soon, like first training, I loved it. It's like all the analysts come from all over the world. You're all there for a month. Like, you're meeting all these people. You're going out every night, like clubbing, whatever. And then in the day you just have tests and you're studying. Like, it's quite vigorous, but I was like doing so well, like loved it. And like, yeah, but obviously that's not real life. That's not the job. I'm like, oh my God, is there a job where I just get to do that? No. But then when the jobs, I think pretty quickly I was put on this deal and yeah, I was just not sleeping because I was in the office and I wasn't having a break, and my whole life was work, because I think, yeah, I guess I way overcommitted to, like, I was dating someone in the office, like, that was like all my social life. I lived with some, good friends from home in Angel, so I'm so fortunate I had them for when everything fell apart. But I think, I don't know, I think it was by, the October or November, I had to see a doctor, because it was like there was maybe, I remember this period of like 8 days or something where I didn't sleep more than 2 hours a night. And I remember there was no time to wash my hair. Like, I had to just use dry shampoo. I just remember that it was like, when will I have time to have a shower long enough I can wash my hair? Because it was like, there wasn't enough time to sleep more than a couple of hours. So, and
was everyone working like that? It was just kind of expected that, like, that was normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in this industry, and not just that industry, but law and what's the other one? Consulting, it can happen. Yeah. It's, people are hospitalized. People die. I think there's a show about that industry, and my friend worked at that, but like knows that person who died. There's always a story like of how intense it is, and in the US I think it's more like drugs involved and stuff, whereas Europe seemed to be way more conservative on that front. But it was just like, just long hours. But my body just didn't cope with it. And
what month had you started? You said you left it in November.
No, November is when I first was like, I have to see a doctor.
Okay.
I started in the summer.
Okay.
So it was super quick. And then, I remember it was just like, I would feel physically like I would get, and it would be like I was going to throw up. Like, I would get an email. Like, I just couldn't. And anything, like, because we ate like 3 meals a day in the office. Like, you'd have to order your food. You had the money we got for dinner, you had to use on delivery. And it was like, I remember one day my Nando's, not that many options in Canary Wharf. My fucking Nando's like didn't arrive or whatever and it was like, I couldn't cope with like small things. It was just like, my resilience was just gone.
Mm.
Like, I was just like, I can't do, like, oh my God, my dinner's not here. Like, I can't. It's like things just started, falling. And then I wasn't helping it, because it's like I then needed a release. So on the weekends I would like go, instead of catching up on sleep and like being wholesome, it was like, oh my God, I want to see my friends, like go out with them, and then like do things I shouldn't do that are just going to make me more sleep deprived and whatever. And then, but it was just this point where I was like, I was not coping, and when I saw a doctor, which was like the most overwhelming thing to even organize, like whatever the company, like emergency doctor or something. And then they like immediately referred me to like the occupational doctor, which is literally, this doctor that just has to see all these bankers and lawyers and people who are like, it's
burning
just,
out basically.
Yeah. And he was just like, this is textbook stress. Like, and explained to me, it was like, this is how you have a balanced life. Like, you need to have sleep. Like, you need to do things that aren't just being in the office all the time. But it just was kind of, not possible to restore balance. And then what happened was I felt like such a failure. Like, I felt like my life was over. Like, it was just a gradual kind of decline until... And I was desperately trying to, like, find a new job and whatever. Like, move teams or, like, move whatever. Change the situation. And then the relationship, the guy who I was dating who'd become, like, my lifeline, because he was, like, my, major support. He then just, like, broke it off out of nowhere. And I, from there became depressed. And it was, like, bad. Like, I felt like my life was completely over. I'd ruined everything. Like, it was worthless. There was, like, no way to recover. And I just felt like it was too hard to... I just didn't want to exist anymore. It was so painful. But, obviously that was just the trigger for it.
And what did you do at that point?
Then I had a lot of time off. So by the following September, I then was like full-time off work.
So you worked almost another year.
Yeah, but it was like holding on for dear life, like on and on. Yeah, oh my God, it was like, so I was depressed during that time. I couldn't stop crying. I was crying constantly. So I'd wake up and it was just like, I have to get to work. I'd be putting on like mascara, just tears rolling down my face. Like, okay, it's not fucking working putting makeup on when you're crying. Just on the tube, like just crying. And like people just kind of looking, like ordering just like can't speak. It's like crying, sitting at my desk, just bawling my eyes out constantly. And I didn't, at that point I got therapy, which is the first time I'd ever had therapy in my life. And I remember the therapist being like, because it was CBT and it was kind of like, cool, we're going to like figure out how to like help you. So it's like you can function and like be able to order coffee and like not be crying at your desk. But I was like, didn't understand that. I'm like, why would I not be crying? I'm in so much pain. Like,
crying is the normal response.
It was like, ugh. So there was a long period of like, it wasn't like I was functionally working. It was like desperately like
just clinging on.
Yeah.
And did you have?
And I was so terrified that I would be fired at any, because it was like, or be frozen out or something awful would happen. But none of that happened. So But sorry, what were you going to say?
Did you have time off during that period? Or
there were periods where it's like, it's just like the resources they have. And it's no one's fault. It's just like it clearly like wasn't the most functional organization in general, as everyone's now discovered. But any place can have, it's like no one's fault. It's just like systems like don't necessarily work. So I remember there was like the mental health, like it was like I was so overwhelmed, so much to do, and like would go to the staff like, I'm on 10 things. How am I supposed to prioritize this? Like and I'm just like feeling so overwhelmed. And it would have been at the point where I was just like not coping. So I would just been like, can't, like in tears, like struggling. And it was like, okay, you've got these 10 things to do that will take you the next like 36 hours without sleeping if you were to do them. But okay, you're like upset. So why don't you just go and take a walk? Just like take some time and then just like come back and do them all. It's like, that makes it worse. It's like,
Does not solve the problem, does it?
Yeah. And then I remember there was like one of the receptionists was like one of the PAs or whatever was like a mental health officer, and I like talked to her, and she's like, okay, why don't you tonight take a bath? And it's like, I don't think you've heard me that I've been in here till 4 a.m. like every night. Like, what? I'm going to go home at 4, like wake up all my housemates by like having a bath. Or like, what the, like, I'm not, this is just not happening. Yeah. So it's just not set up. And oh my God, I feel, because I was like, someone has to do something, but I remember going into like the head of my team, this like senior banker, and just sitting in his office and I was crying. So I just wanted to say like, it's like something like we need to help this. Because after I realized like no one's going to fire me or freeze me out or like be mean to me. But it's just like the situation's still like not resolved. Like, so I was like, how can I, like, I need, like, how can we resolve this situation? But I couldn't, I was so upset, like, I couldn't speak. It was that crying where it's just like, like the ugliest crying of all time, because I was trying to assert myself, but I was so upset. And this poor man who's probably so busy, because, you know, they're extremely busy people as well. It's not just like a joke to have people there all hours of the night. Like, everyone's super busy. But he just had to like spend like 45 minutes of me just not being able to breathe and him just giving me his handkerchief and just...
And what did he say?
Well, people don't have this emotional, you know, we don't have these skills of like, what do you do? And like, he's stressed and busy and dealing with all this stuff and like super high pressure job. Like, he's not equipped to... And then who is equipped? Like, that's what I mean. It's just like the system isn't really... I was so fortunate to live with one of my best friends, and she, who was able to like look out for me in that time, and she saw on my laptop, like the screensaver was like Mental Health Awareness Month. Like, we really care about it. She was like, is this a fucking joke? Like, but that's what I saw at Cambridge as well. It's like so much talk about like mental health, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, what? I think last year there were like 8 or 9 suicides at Cambridge. Like, it's just like there's a lot of people don't necessarily have the practical skills, or the system isn't set up. I don't know. It's very complicated, but
So how did you leave it? Or you said in that September you had full time off, but you were still technically employed by them, or?
Yeah, so I had sick leave for a period. And then I ended up going to Cambridge. So I just, at some point.
How did that decision happen during that period? You must have been pretty burned out, right?
Yeah, and then I was able to, start. Yeah, so I had time off. I went to Egypt during that time. I'm like, fuck, should I be talking about this? But then I'm like, oh wait, this bank literally doesn't exist anymore, so hopefully it's fine. No, I mean, whatever. So I went traveling, and I was trying to find another job, but I still had that ego thing that was like, I was like, okay, well now I'm going to do private equity and I'm going to get a job and because because that from banking, that's like the funnel into private equity, and that's like in the US, like in New York, like everyone's obsessed with private equity. Like, how do I buy the yacht in the Hamptons, whatever. And then as well, I think being at a time when they were like, oh, we need to interview female candidates for like quotas and whatever. So I was getting a lot of inbounds. And
were you doing better mentally during that time, or?
Like ups and downs. There was a point, so yeah, in the July 2001, I read like Eckhart Tolle and
2001.
Sorry, 2021.
Wow, this is a very different time scale from that.
2021. And then it was like that depth, you know, where it's like, oh, the cracks are where the light comes in. Who said that?
Leonard Cohen, right?
Did he? Okay. What did Rooney say about something like that? Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's Rooney. No, I don't know. Anyway, so it was that thing of like, wow, like through such depths, and then I was like, oh my God, this like, I got access to like, I think I read Siddhartha, Herman Hesse, like all these things. I was like, whoa, that's like, and that's when I was, so that was the July, but then and then it's like, it's just like this long recovery period, and you're not really functional. Yeah, like I wasn't able to work, like wasn't.
But
really
you had stopped crying every day.
Stopped crying, but then there was another bad period in like the January where it was, really bad again, and then that, I mean, that's a whole nother story with my like medication journey or whatever. But that I remember when I was like, hang on a sec, because they were like, oh, we'll just increase the dose. And I was like, hang on, like, I don't want this to...
Of antidepressants? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
But so then that was bad. And then the pandemic happened, and then that was actually good for me mentally, because it was like slowing down and like... And then that's when I did the normal people thing, and I was like, oh my God, access this stuff. But I was like, I'm in a safe space where I can work through this and I have all the time. And obviously when you're being paid, and it's not the stress of like survival, like I need to go and earn money, or like my survival's a threat. It was like, okay, I had the space and time. But I was interviewing, it was that thing like, okay, I will go and get a job at Blackstone or something, and then prove, like, look how good I am, like, because I felt like such a failure, and I was like, I can prove that I'm not a failure, and I'm actually like the best.
And this is in 2021 or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
And going to 2022, because it was like, what am I going to do? Like, I need to do something, and then and I was like trying to get. I was not. No, and then I just realized like I wasn't getting anywhere with getting a job. Also, because I was like pretending, like it's even it's like even uncomfortable to say it now, because there's so much stigma. People were so like, oh my God, no one can ever know that you're having like sick leave. Like, oh my God, this is going to be on your record forever, and there's so much shame around it and whatever. And for recruiters and stuff, like I had to pretend I was still what the fuck am I meant to say? Like. So that was just not working. And then I realized, it was actually the psychologist at the time helped me think it through, because I was like, well, I need something to do, and I need a visa to stay in the country. Well, I knew I wanted to stay in the country. And then I was like, oh, why don't I go and study at Cambridge? And then so I did that.
Did you apply to other places, or it was just...
I was looking... Well, because I was like, oh, I've always wanted to do a MBA in the US. So I was like, okay, I'll look at that. And then I was like, oh, damn, the deadlines are passed. And then I was like, okay, well, what are you going to do this year? Like, what's your major pastime going to be? That was like the psychologist thing. And I was like, oh, maybe I can study like psychology or theology or like, I had no idea. But I was like, that would be so cool to go to Oxford or Cambridge and study something. So, and then I was looking at random courses. And it's like, okay, submit like a thesis for like, it's like, okay, how am I going to get into a master's of like theology? Like, what the fuck? Right. I studied maths. And then I was like, okay, I'll apply for maths. Like, no. Like, maths at Cambridge.
Quite difficult.
Yeah. And so then I found this course, Master of Finance, which was for post-experience, which was, so you had to have worked in finance for at least 2 years. I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. So I'm not going back to be with like 22-year-olds. Like I'll be with people more my age, and I'm
a mature student, as they call them.
Yeah. So I didn't have to be a mature student. I was, found that course. So then I went and did that.
And how was that?
Yeah, that was good. But that's when I became so more broadly interested in the world, because I spent a lot of time at the Cambridge Union, which is like the home of free speech, or like the longest continuous debating society in the world, I think. And they just have amazing speakers. For, I think they have like the president of Azerbaijan this week, but they'll have politicians, whoever, and then, like Bill Gates and whatever, people like that. Did you spend much time there when you were at Cambridge?
No, not much. I have been there, but I didn't spend a lot of time there. Yeah.
It was also during the pandemic, so there wasn't necessarily that much happening, but that was going on. So yeah, I spent a lot of time there, and I just became interested in like everything that was going on and how different university was compared to when I was there. And like, I always use this example. I was the women and non-binary officer at my college, but I'm like, what's non-binary? Like, we didn't have that word when I was at uni, which makes me sound like ancient, but it's like, like whatever, 6 years before or whatever it was. And yeah, I mean, even for my college, Magdalen was the last Oxbridge college to accept women, so that was only in the 80s. So yeah, it was like, okay, it feels like there's been like this period of a lot of things changing quickly, and which I think is just a neutral thing, like whatever. But the thing for me was like, there's like a breakdown in conversation.
Right.
Or it's like there's different people from all different places in the world and or different backgrounds in the UK, different religions, whatever. And there seems to be like a lot of ideology, and like, where's the space for people to have conversations and like embrace differences and learn from people. And even, because there was Israel-Palestine conflict at the time, and I was like aware of some of the anti-Semitism that was like directed at people resulting of that, which I didn't really like. And then there was also a lot going on with China, and like people talking a lot about China. But my course, there were a lot of Chinese students in my course, maybe like 30% or more, and it was like, why don't we ask our peers what they think, and if they feel like they're oppressed, or what, not having a view, but just like literally learn. Like, why wouldn't we like learn from other people by talking to them? And I was having so many interesting conversations. And that's where the idea for the podcast came.
And you started a podcast then?
No, I started one like a few months after leaving, when I was back home with a friend who I'd met at Cambridge, who was also from Melbourne.
So back home in Melbourne, you started?
Yeah, back home in Melbourne. Oh yeah, because pandemic, so I hadn't been home for a long time, and I wasn't allowed to go home without being detained by the government as per Australia's rules. So when I was allowed in without detention, I went home for 3 months and then did a podcast there.
And this is, you had finished your degree at Cambridge, or?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you went back to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Started the podcast.
Yeah.
Then came back to London.
Yeah. And I was
what was the time frame? How long were you back in Melbourne?
For 3 months. I was super lost. So then, then I had a lovely boyfriend during COVID, and when I finally got over like the bad situation, then I had this lovely boyfriend, but then we then broke up after Cambridge, and then I was like really lost and like literally as well, like sleeping on people's couches or whatever. Well, because I was just disorganized. Like, what was I doing? I was not ready to like be back in the world, I guess. And I was terrified of work. Like I think I way overcommitted to work. Was like, that's something, this is going to be my life. Like, I love working till 4 a.m. To then like reject work completely. Like, I will never belong in a workplace and I'm going to do my own thing and I'm just going to make money on the internet. And people were kind of like, how are you going to do that? And it was like, don't you dare challenge me kind of thing. Like, but people were just genuinely asking, like, where are you going to live? How are you going to pay rent? Like, I was just and I was still depressed.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like, did you get better after leaving the job and you were in Cambridge? Like, you said you recovered a bit, but you were still depressed, you said? It
was just ups and, it's just, it like so cliche that it's a healing journey, but it was just like, there are periods where I was okay, and then, but the whole pattern that I've only just recently finally broken with the boyfriend I broke up with last summer is the dependency thing that all goes back to childhood. So I didn't know how to like survive on my own. So I always had a relationship, and it was like I needed that for survival, which is also the depression. It was like, that's why it was so painful, because it was like, I can't survive like with all the stuff with work. And then, so I think I ended up again in that, so during that time at Cambridge and whatever, it was like, okay, I'm okay because, well, it's like this other person has to be like partly responsible for me. Otherwise, like, I won't be okay. And then also it was like therapy was like dependent. It's like, oh, I'm only okay if I have therapy or something. And
so were you doing therapy from that time, from that sort of first time? You mentioned CBT.
Yeah, I did CBT. Then it was schema therapy, which is more similar to IFS, but like a different model. And then it was, but I thought I could access resources at Cambridge. That was like really hard. It's like, obviously with the pandemic, stuff changes. Different, insurance, it's so expensive, like, because it was first through private insurance. So then it's like you're seeing a therapist who's actually billable at like £380 an hour. So then if your insurance, you only have so many sessions, and then if you're paying for that out of pocket, that's like so expensive, so it's like, then it's just like a journey of different, and then I found, psychedelics really helped me, and I started taking charge. And then I'm so grateful I had a doctor who empowered me to take charge of my journey, of my like healing, and that reading and learning and whatever.
And when was that?
That was, I think, during Cambridge. And then, different therapists, but I think I was still, oh my God, sorry, this is going for so long. People are going to be like, we just don't care that much.
I'm sure they will. Don't worry about that.
So just ups and downs. Like, I remember in the winter, I was with my boyfriend and got stuck in Jersey, which is a beautiful place to be stuck, that island in the English Channel, with his family. And I remember that was a point where I had that thought again, like, that I just don't want to be here. So that was like a very low point. And then, it's honestly been up and down until the week, because also I had a very, very low point in February this year. really bad, dark thoughts. And now I'm doing way better. And I've been feeling way better for, what month are we in? So that's like 3 months ago. So hopefully this continues. Like, it does feel like I'm way more resilient and I've worked so many things out. Like, the main thing being like, I am responsible for myself. Like, I can survive. I don't need, like, this sounds so stupid, but a therapist. Oh, not a therapist, a coach. This woman through whatever, this long story, this manifesting thing that I do, that I have talked about on this podcast actually with Charlotte. People, feel free to listen to that episode. She, after because this abandonment wound is like, this thing's like torn open or at least like the last 3 breakups I've had, it's like so painful, and it genuinely feels like I'm going to die. Like, it's like I can't breathe. Like, it's like panic. Like, it's just this deep wound, which goes back to that time as like a 4-year-old, which now I understand, having done all the stuff. But the last one, this amazing person who I have to write to, her name's Amanda Blair, she helped me. Like, she was like, it feels like you're going to die, but you are not going to die. You do not need that man to survive. Like, you can physically survive without that person. But it just didn't feel like I could. And now I realize I can. And it's like, you don't, like, humans, we need each other to survive. This is what's actually really helped in the therapy I'm doing at the moment, which is like amazing, which is the internal family system stuff. It's like, yeah, we need other humans to survive, but it can kind of be any humans. Like, we can form relationships quickly. Like, obviously that's like fucking terrible if you lose anyone in your life, but if you imagine losing everyone, but you can adapt. Like, you won't die because of that, unless you're so depressed that you end up ending your life. But if you can realize, like, you can survive. So if there's like an apocalypse, it's like, you will adapt, you will find people. Like, you do need other people, crucially. You can't survive on your own. And there's that story of Wild. Do you know that? The guy who...
No.
He tries to live on his own,
yes.
completely in like Canada or somewhere.
Pacific Northwest.
And then
Canada
he realizes like, you can't, like, you actually need other humans for survival. But yeah, it doesn't. But as a child, you literally need your parents to survive, or you will die.
Yes.
Your parents that's why you form that super strong attachment. And yeah. Anyway, so that was, honestly, it sounds so basic, but that was ground. And I realized that in my relationships, yeah, I would feel like I need that, like, love. And Hollywood and whatever reinforces that. It's like,
this kind of codependency.
Yeah, not just Hollywood, but like all the books. Yeah, when you read this stuff of even, going back further, and it's like, no, this person is not mentally okay. That they are like putting their whole survival on another person. Like, that's not healthy. Like, you don't need... Yeah. I mean, that is like a beautiful thing about love, that you can love someone that much but it's like, please don't. And that is sadly what happens, like, people after divorce and whatever. Anyway, but I realized, like, no, I can be dependent on myself, and I am responsible for myself. And then anyway, so I think now, because I'm fully from that place, because I think people can also then become dependent on therapists, and I think I got to that point as well. But it's like, no, actually, obviously, there are things that, it's like, you can adapt. Like, obviously, there are things you don't want to lose in your life that would be terrible, but you can adapt. And when you know that, it's like, then you're super resilient.
So you came back from Melbourne to London.
Yeah.
What was the plan then? Or did you have one? Seems
that was me like
quite
yelling
often know
at
exactly what you
No,
want.
well, I was like, I'm doing a gap year. My thing was like, oh, Winston Churchill was disappointed with the holes in his education, which clearly you can see the holes in mine, like not knowing the date of the First Fleet. Anyway, and I was like, he spent this time just reading books, and I'm going to do that. And I was like, I'm going to read 100 non-fiction books. Which was just like, why? And then I started making...
like me in so many ways.
Yeah, and then I started making YouTube videos, and I was like, I'm going to be a YouTuber. Like, I'd never even watch YouTube myself. Like, it was just, I don't know. And in my head, I was like, I'm going to be successful at this. But yeah, subconsciously, I think it was because I felt like there was no choice. But then I kind of didn't really, I was like, oh, it's just a gap year so people would get off my back. But I was really, struggling to I was just like piecing my life back together. But I was such low self-esteem when I came back. Like, I felt like, okay, if I'm pursuing my dreams, then I have to like live with nothing and like be a like struggling artist or something. I don't know. It was just like, and I was in a thing of like, why do I even deserve money? Like, homeless people don't have money. Like, feeling like, oh, is money evil?
And so this is the start of 2022, was it? Or
yeah,
it's around the time.
This was like a year ago. I was struggling with this stuff.
Around the time I met you.
Yeah. Well, when did I... Yeah, a few months before. Yeah.
And so, final-ish question, like, how did this growing up podcast come out of that period or any of the...
Well, that's what I really wanted to do. I was like, okay, I want to bridge this division that I see that people can't talk to each other. And you have, I and like other people, there's so much to learn from people. Yeah, a few things. There's like, okay, that's what's really helped me. That's what I said in the first episode of this podcast, is like hearing other people's stories of struggling and them talking completely openly. And the example I always use is Tyson Fury, that heavyweight champion boxer. I read his book in COVID, and he's just like, from an empowered place, like not a place of like, I'm a victim. He talks about his mental health and, you know, going to end his life one day, and like how he, you know, worked through all of this. I found that stuff so empowering. So it was like, so many people have stories, and like it helps others so much when they share them honestly and vulnerably. So that was one part. And then it was like, bridging, like being able to see that we're all just humans, and if someone has some view that you don't agree with, like maybe if you understand like what their values are or how they grew up, that. And then just learning as well. It was like, I want to learn about the world. Like, it's so much more interesting to learn from people than to just, and to discuss with people than to just like read books in a silo and not speak to anyone. But I was so scared to do it. So I wasn't, you told me this. I was like, I'm so scared of rejection, like so scared to contact anyone for the podcast. And you were like, why don't you try and like make it a game, like try and get 100 rejections? Like I was just so scared for so long to make it. I knew I needed to make it, and like doing the YouTube and all that was just going around the thing that I actually desperately wanted to do. And and now I'm doing it. I've started it. Great. We're up to 50 episodes. And I've also realized how important work is in my life and how much I love being in a workplace. And I do love finance, and I love, I don't know how else to explain it other than like I love that pride I talked about in investment banking. It's like that is a real thing that I like love having that. Dressing in a certain way. It just sounds so lame because it's so not cool to be like, love that kind of super corporate life, but I genuinely just love it. And I realized that was so missing, like being around people, being in that environment, having, doing that kind of work and earning money in that way, that was missing, and I was so terrified by it. But then recently I went and spent some time at this hedge fund. The guy who runs the fund, I met him at a suicide prevention breakfast, which that opportunity came out through. I got to go to that breakfast like through someone who reads this newsletter and blah, blah, blah. And I invited him to come on the podcast. He said no, but he gave me that opportunity to go and work, which I'm so grateful for. And that was like the week before. I was so bad, negative thoughts of that I didn't want to live anymore. And then to be back, like it was just the change. Like suddenly my brain, I don't know, I think some things are kind of basic. My brain was just like, it didn't have time to have those thoughts. Well, also the therapy helped me into the internal family systems and to talk to those parts who are like protector parts who want to help protect me from pain or from, that's like a whole nother conversation, how all that works. But yeah, so the therapy, but also going in and my brain just being like, okay, we have to get to work. Like, we have to get dressed. Like, it's just like, get out of bed, get dressed, you've got to be in the office. Like, there's an expectation. And then
that structure and ritual and things like that.
Yeah. And then being around people and talking to people and smiling and like dressing up, having pride in how I look and like things like that. I'm like, oh my God, this is the missing piece. And then it's like, this is my long answer to your recent question about how do you balance creativity and like living a meaningful life and all. I'm like, yeah, I need all these ingredients and like, but I do need to still be doing this podcast and expressing myself and like bringing this into the world and trying to help other people through this way and hopefully provide something to this audience who I want to get way more connected with. So I'm like so grateful for doing this now. So thanks, Bryan. But so now it's like, oh my God, okay, these are the pieces and like, how do we fit them all together? And now, I've got to find the next opportunity that, works with all of this.
And any reflections on the 50th episode or how has it been going? Maybe it's a whole nother conversation, but.
Yeah, I think that's a whole nother conversation.
Okay.
But no, I don't want to make it a vain thing about like 50 episodes. Like I know people do that, but it's like, whatever, this is just another episode. And I'm fully committed to bringing really good content to you guys. And I think the main thing is I'm feeling way more confident now about getting over. Yeah, I don't really have that rejection thing so much anymore. And now I just need to be bold and be organized and like contact people who have really cool stories to share, like continuing contacting
and you're still excited about it, I can tell.
I'm so excited about it.
That's amazing. So 3 more. How do you stay grounded?
I am obsessed with my morning routine, which is I wake up, meditate for 10 minutes, write, like put a timer on it and just write for 10 minutes. Yeah, I think you do something similar, right? Yeah, just get whatever out of my head, talk to my inner child if necessary or whatever part of me is, just write. Then I've added doing Wim Hof breath work and doing a physical workout, which I've now got that thing. You know how you can get addicted to that? I'm like obsessed with it now. Like it makes me sound like a crazy person, but it's like minimal effort. I literally do it like in my room or in my living room, like just straight away, like get out of bed and just start doing like push-ups and squats and burpees, whatever. It sounds super lame, but it's like it just removes all that resistance from like I have to exercise or I have to go to the gym. It's like no, just like I put a timer on and I was only doing 10 minutes. Now I'm doing 20 minutes and I'm like so excited for that part of my day.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's what it would be at the moment.
And what books have impacted your life, or any book you want to name in particular?
Well, I think it's those two that I already named during that, when I first read, when I first saw the light, like more than so it's like depression, you're like way below your baseline. But for me, it was like I saw glimpses that were like way above anything I've ever. It was like accessing, I guess, spirituality or this deeper level of life beyond just that, living in New York, like working, partying, having fun, but like you're not really conscious. That was, it's going to sound like kind of cringe, but it was Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, like everything I read. And I probably need to reread it, but it was just like, I'd never...
So not The Power of Now, but A New Earth.
Yeah. Power of Now, I never got through. I started reading it. But when those books are like, read this slowly and like savor it, it's like, okay, I never finished them. But A New Earth, it just, for some reason, it just got me on this level. Like every page I was like, oh my God, like, holy shit, like this is so true. And like, I think I should reread that. And then Siddhartha as well.
Herman Hesse.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. And what 3 words describe how you want to show up in the world? Or the best version of yourself?
I would say authentic, compassionate, and I think now it's changing, and I'm gonna say like lighthearted or something.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I like it. I've changed mine, I think, too.
What else?
I can't remember what the last ones I gave were. I know I said intelligent, curious, generous. I think that's what I go for right now, which I think is slightly different from what I've said before.
Nice. But that's what it should be, right?
Yeah, it
we
should
just
change
keep
over time.
evolving.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
Oh my God.